Welcome to the Astrology Star Sisters. I'm your host, Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and today we're talking about 2025 Uranus ingress or moves into Gemini. And my star sister joining me today is Sue Rose Minahan. Hi, Sue. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. It's been a while. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. This is a real pleasure. Yeah.
I hear you're having a storm. You're in Hawaii and it's stormy there, and it's really windy here on Camino Island.
Yes, we had to take everything in from the lanai, but our spot's okay. I think others flooded. Always sort of sad.
Oh,
But yes.
wow. Well,
Yeah.
take care. Okay. So to get a hold of Sue, her website is talkcosmos.com and my website is alightpath.com. And we always enjoy hearing from you. And we're going to talk about Uranus. Take it away, Sue.
Uranus is such a revolutionary planet by its very factor of existing. It orbits on its side, so it's not north and south, it's east and west. And it also rotates backwards. It's a total breaking of all the rhythms that we even consider. And we do associate it with liberation. It was discovered in the 1700s during that time that the United States here wanted their freedom from the colonial America wanted their freedom from the motherland, Britain. And France also wanted their freedom, the people, from their monarchy. It was really we the people. It was we the network, the group. And that's in so many ways that it focuses in our life is that it's that individuality of the soul to express, because it is humanity at its highest level. That's the ideal. And many times in Iranian is not just the group, but it's to achieve that status of not just status, but status in the sense that it has a level, a standard, a higher standard. And of course, technology is, because Uranus by itself, it's of the sky with mythology, and also the point being, let's take, and I won't get into that. I was going to, but maybe I will, and maybe I won't. But the fact is, take not earthquake in the sky. Liz, help me. What when
Well,
when it
space exploration is very expansive, forward thinking, very much about the internet and technology. Lightning.
That's what I was thinking of, was lightning. Exactly, because those things are so brilliant. And by the very fact of its insight, you suddenly see everything that's absolutely opening up to you in a vision on a night when it's been dark and stormy and the lightning flashes, and then it's all visible and it goes away. But it's that insight for just what you said, the technology, the science, the space, the vision ahead.
Breakthroughs.
Right. And Uranus in Gemini was the lower octave of Aquarius, which modern astrology has Uranus ruling. And so when you combine them, it is that quickening. Gemini is transportation from one spot to the other. It's the twins that one was mortal and one was immortal. And they kept wanting to visit each other when the mortal died. And it's between the spirit and the material. But therefore, there's diversity. It's gathering. It's our immediate travels in our neighborhood. It's how we learn. We're always learning about somebody that's different from us, right? It's that interest, that curiosity of what exists around us. And communication, Liz, there's so much more. Let's have a lovely.
Well, and Gemini is communication on a basic level, but Uranus is communication, I would say, on sparks of genius ideas. I always kind of associate Uranus with the flashes of insight that come.
Yes, exactly, like that lightning. It's very true. And so with Uranus and Gemini, it's not just the individual that's born with it. I happen to have Uranus and Gemini. It's a very last degree of it. And it's everybody. It's the entire climate of people. I think communication in itself is going to take a huge revelation. Not a revelation for a revolution is the idea. Because how do we communicate? It's usually in writing. It's in talking psychology. It's that dynamic of writing some tool that somebody else can interpret and have an exchange of thought. So it gets from the mystical, what we are thinking, you could say the abstract, to the concrete of vocal expression. But that's really the key. I just discovered in a talk that I listened to by Andrew Watt, another astrologer, a metaphysical concept, that back after the Trojan War, which was a period of time, it's also in mythology, but it's really there were eclipses that denoted that time, and this is BC, that language stopped, that there had been language, and it had been by pictures, words. And as we know, there's a lot of word forms that are still in many languages that interpret and share the ideas. But it was like 350 years that there weren't any, that wasn't language. And that is really a consideration to consider, that nobody could read or write in miles. It was suggested 500 miles around you, which at that time was the world, perhaps, because of the lack of our transportation and modes of traveling, until language changed from pictures, you could say, to letters that denoted sound. And I think it was Phoenicians that did that. And in that, they took off. They wrote the Iliad, and I did not personally look at this history, so I'm remembering it from what I was told, but it ignited everything in me. I've wondered about language since I was a kid. I have so much Gemini with me in this lifetime. Thank you.
Well, and AI is taken off, and I took my aunt to the doctor yesterday, and in the office they have this machine that's on this rolling stand-up thing that interprets all the different languages, so they don't have to have interpreters come to the offices. And it was many different languages, some kind of computer system, but I've never seen anything like that. So it's like, wow, that's a huge innovation. It makes it so much easier at medical clinics and doctors' offices if they have this computer to interpret the different languages so that they can communicate with people that don't speak the same language. It was amazing.
I'm impressed. That is absolutely true, because and that really gets down to the whole idea is that we rely on interpretations, but this suggests that there's going to be a new way of communicating, because Aquarius, that is ruled by the modern Uranus, is also my mind just splattered. I was like a lightning storm of itself. I'm so sorry, but it is genius. It's all that, but intuitive. It's intuitive. It goes into that intuitiveness of nature, and therefore that is the unseen in a sense. It's unexpressed as of yet, and I'm thinking that many people are developing their intuitive natures in many different ways. It's a language that we don't talk about in this society as much. There are certain groups that do, of course, in the psychic realm, but we shuttle it off. We shelve it to those categories. But in this sense of even AI getting more intuitive, it will branch out this sense of language. So it's an unknown. It'll be exciting.
So there's some dates here about Uranus and Gemini. July 7th of 2025 through May 22nd of 2033 for an 8-year cycle.
It is. It's that entire spread. And this particular one is only going to be for a few months. It'll be in the middle of the summer, in July 7th, until November 7th, as it happens to be. And then it goes retrograde because it's at the very 0 degrees of Gemini. It'll go back into Taurus for about half a year until 2026 in April. And then it stays there to finish this 8-year. It's often 7 years, but here it is 8 years because of the retrograde period, until again in the middle of the year in August of 2032.
Right. And on here, we have a mistake on the slides from April 26, 2026. Ingresses to Gemini. So, and then you had it because it backed into Cancer and it moves forward again. So I think that's what it meant. It wasn't really a mistake. Sorry about that.
Right. Yeah, it goes into Cancer. But yes. So, in other words, December 12th, I wrote this and I'm just trying to figure 2032, May 22.
It probably backs and forth between Cancer and Gemini because in
August, yes, it does. That's right. It does once again. So, and isn't that interesting too? Because Cancer is the northernmost at the solstice, the 0 point. So it goes a little bit before. No, I'm thinking backwards. Forget it. Let's go on.
Okay. Uranus takes 84 years to make a complete cycle around the zodiac. So the last time Uranus was in Gemini was from August 7th to October 5th of 1941, and then May 15th of 1942 to August 30th of 1948, and November 12th, 1948 to June 10th of 1948. So
when it did exactly the same, it went to Cancer and Taurus on either side. Yes. But can we go back to that for a minute?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Because one wonders, well, it is 84 years. That's a factor. It's a long time. So most people in this lifetime, or many people, that generation is at the end of their life cycle. Yet what happened during that time? Of course, there was during World War II, which people remember, but it was also a lot of reconstruction. So, and we have to remember that the tools that we have to recreate change, and also what are the other planetary aspects? What's the whole environment involved when you're looking at Gemini? Because it's in this Gemini is interested in their immediate environment. And at that time, Pluto was in Leo, whereas now Pluto is in Aquarius. That's another, the opposite sign. And being in Aquarius really wants to have community and AI. So I think really we need to not necessarily fear that because it was in war at that time, that and why did we have war? It was because of the conquest between freedom. You know, Uranus wants freedom. It wants to break the mold. It wants to break that cycle. And going ahead, we have many more tools to perhaps help us find that common denominator, because it also looks at us as we're one in a sense, you know, of the unity of humanity. Thank you, Liz.
Well, and those people that are in their mid 80s are having a Uranus return and a Pluto opposition. So, and that doesn't happen for everybody because some signs Pluto is in a lot longer. So not everybody will have a Pluto opposition.
Yeah, it's very much it's an interesting transit that I think perhaps, I hope astrologers look at. I mean, talk to these people, oral history, right? They talk to the people to find out what was it in their life that now is culminating or falling apart not everybody is in a nursing home. There's many people that are still writing books and doing things, but regardless of their activity, it's history, that life, personal history, that's writing the story. What are their stories?
So Uranus ingresses at 0 degrees Gemini on July 7th at 3:45 a.m. in Washington, D.C. This is a Washington, D.C. chart. And we'll go to the next chart and start talking about the aspects. So this one has a T-square with Uranus opposite the moon in Sagittarius and square to Mars. And I can't see what sign Mars is in. Mars is in Virgo here. And then the sun is square the north node, and Mercury is square Vesta and Juno, and Jupiter is square Saturn. So squares are always about adjustments, a little friction, some work to do, and you can go ahead and start talking about those, Sue.
Yes, we separate these, of course, because they're action oriented. Squares are and an opposition. Well, oppositions are working with something, because I do some vibrational astrology, and that's really what research shows. So it's not it without any judgment. It's just working with something, two different things that not always are in a harmonious understanding with each other. Maybe they aren't. And the squares, but it's action, all this action. So if we have Uranus itself in a T-square with our moon and Mars, we're looking at and this is a seed chart. It's the very first time that it's ingressing into Gemini. So that's why we're looking at it for, like, what's the story here? The very birth that's telling us something. And it's immutable. So there's going to be a lot of change. There'll be sudden changes with how our past, of our feelings, our history, our viewpoint, our belief system of what has built us, and with what we're trying to discern with our actions. It's going to be a very, I think, mobile and igniting much growth, you could say, because hopefully that is it. But it also cuts things away. When you get Mars and the moon together, Mars moves so quicker, although fortunately it's in Virgo, as you pointed out. It's not quite as harsh, but Virgo's trying to discern why do you feel these ways? And is that really the best way to organize your belief system? Which, if you're brave, which Mars wants you to be, then you can cut away and go, okay, that really isn't serving me anymore. It's getting in my way. But it's synergetic. There's other factors here. There's other players on the stage. So shall I go on to the others, or did you have a thought?
Well, I wanted to make a comment that the moon can represent the people. And since we're looking at the Washington, D.C. chart, so Canada and the United States, and you could all basically say North America, because this could be active for almost all of it, that the people, through the change, the people want the truth of the matter. And in some respects, since it's in Sagittarius, and Mars is separating from a square with Uranus, but the moon is applying to it because the moon moves so fast. So that'll be pretty strong. So around this time, it's also the birthday of the United States. There could be a little bit of tension going on then. So, breathe and make sure what you hear the first time is correct, and maybe pause, because it could change in an hour or a day or a couple of days.
Yes, very fast, very rapid, as we were saying with Gemini. But I really love this idea that you brought in the people, the wholeness, because it is both personal and interpersonal. And of course, this chart does represent, as you note, all of us. And I find this very hopeful that collectively, at this point, with the world politics as they're going, that perhaps we'll be reevaluating without a retrograde, but just because of new information and the energies combined of determining what is what. That's how really the United States was founded, was many voices. In fact, I think anything that gets established goes through that ritual of many voices coming to the forefront. And you're right, it does take, I'm always glad that you remind us to pause and go within, because that's really the only center we have. And that's the sun. The sun represents our whole. And therefore, the sun is in an activation point by being square to the nodal axis, the north node and the south node. Therefore, it can't be square to one without the other. It's at the bendings, as they call it. And that means that really we have a choice of what we're letting go of, usually with the south node that's getting obstructive. What are we, my thought is, we're asking ourselves, what are we organizing our lives to? What are the details? What is the large strategy here? Well, not necessarily strategy, but the focus, because the north node is in Pisces, which unifies the whole. And I'm hoping it removes people from feeling of victims to feeling that they're going to use some of these tools to improve the health and the welfare of it with that square. And then if you go into Mercury, Mercury is also in an activation. In fact, Mercury, which is always transporting ideas and working, and very close to Uranus, it is Gemini, it's the ruler of Gemini, and it's the ruler of the south node in Virgo. So it has quite a few tasks here. But its task is asking us, okay, Vesta, what's your altar? What is on your hearth that you are protecting, of your home, of your life, of because the Vesta was protecting the flame of our existence. And in Juno, what are you married to? What's your alliances? So what's your team? Who are you really believing in your past with that moon in Sagittarius? Are they really speaking right? It's getting so deep. Oh my goodness, Liz.
Well, and with that Mercury and Leo, it's like speaking from the heart, and Vesta and Juno in Scorpio, it's like going to the truth, going deep, going to the heart of the matter in how you're communicating in your relationships, how where you live, where your foundation is, and what kind of changes might need to take place, um, etc. And also a correction here: the sun is actually square Ceres, not the North Node. Sorry about
Oh
that.
dear. Oh, that's huge. Yeah, because I think I don't know if I did that or if we both worked on these. Well,
I
then that's a
missed it. You
difference.
missed it, so it's okay.
Well,
But
that is a big difference. Did you ever thought about that? Because I'm thinking, in a way, it can still relate, because the North Node, the nodes represent a choice between old and where our comfort zone that we're used to, and going new and trying new terrain, which is still going to exist. And it's in Pisces and Virgo, so it's not too far off. But with Ceres, that's a lot of nurturing, and that's looking at the grief.
well, and I just listened to a really interesting workshop the other day, and this person believed that talking about all the grief is, yes, it's a part of Ceres, but it's the shadow side of Ceres, and nurturing and grandmotherly like energy and Mother Earth is more in alignment with Ceres. So that square, it's like reevaluating and highlighting, we're having interesting weather patterns, winds, snow, rain, floods, fires. So I would just say it's like bringing those things up with that sun and square to Ceres in the cardinal signs. Do you
Yes,
want to say anything
because,
more about that?
well, no, well, I'll just say that the sun is actually trine the North Node. In some ways, and maybe this is it goes into that Thales. It's a little wide. It's 5 degrees, but it is the sun, and we give the sun a large latitude. And therefore, it's sextile the South Node, meaning that exactly what you were saying by looking at recognizing that we can make it more holistic by letting go. Well, Jupiter, I mean, I was thinking so much about that error here of what I drew and that the reinterpretation. Can you recapitalize what you were saying about Ceres?
Well, that there's we're very much in touch with her grief and loss, and she is the rules
Mother.
over crops, and she is a mother figure. But there's also a grandmother figure or energy to her, and nurturing is a big part. So,
Huge.
how are we nurturing ourselves? Right now, we're having an egg shortage here in the Pacific Northwest, and I
Oh,
believe it's other
everywhere.
places.
Hawaii, you can't get any eggs.
Mm-hmm. So, that would be one form of that. And so it's like, how are we as a whole going to work with that energy, and how do we produce food? Because on a certain level, Ceres rules food, but usually it's more the crops. But chickens produce eggs, and they have to eat grain, so that's okay. And then I would look at Jupiter square Saturn, and Saturn traditionally rules Uranus, and so the Jupiter, and they're separating because Saturn's Saturn's moving forward, so but they're going to separate. They're starting in to separate from each other at this point. So it's like whatever Saturn wants to rein in, so to speak, or put the rules around, could be some restrictions at that time, because Jupiter makes things bigger. And if Saturn, there could be like this argument: we want rules, we don't want rules, we want limitations, we don't want limitations. So it'll be interesting around that time to see what's going on.
And that particular square is it's a paramount, vital aspect because of the conjunction back in late 2020. This is the first square, and it's been during a certain time that's a whole subject. I think I've covered it in some of my shows, and perhaps you have too. But it's not any square. It's between, like you say, between the expander and the contractor. And combined with that square to Ceres that you so aptly brought in, is powerful, because food can be manipulated, and it is very required, and it really and it also requires certain climate conditions, right? Although we could have more indoor aqua farming where it was quite regulated with light, and that might be a whole dimension that could. And oh my goodness, I'm dreaming, but if we could really go into other forms of energy, using the sun, using the wind, using the tides, using the change of temperature, which they haven't yet come up with. But I keep thinking every day the sun goes and comes, and there's a changing of temperature, and any contrast that can be channeled into some kind of energy. But let's say technology, maybe with AI's help, comes up with new sources of energy, then we could have farms that were internal anywhere that was fed. And particularly too, here I'm really dreaming, if not only we could create energy, but hold it, because that's been a big factor, is how do you transport that unit of energy that's been created by the sun somewhere else? There's certain areas, whether it's Hawaii or whether it's Arizona, whether it's Saudi Arabia, that can manifest a lot of just sun power. But then how do you transport that to, let's say, Iceland, or even down in the southern tip of Argentina or Chile? And the other is, how do you cool it? You can also heat things, but how do you cool it? I've been looking at this since the 70s, where there's been many articles, and it's still a dynamic, but maybe AI can help us, because if they can, then we can have these farms in Nebraska or wherever else, or here in the hills and the jungles of wherever, where we have water that circulates itself and feeds, and we have energy coming to light the lights that they need and create the food that's healthy that we want.
Well,
Thank you,
maybe
Liz.
with Uranus going into Gemini, they'll finally harness lightning, because that has so much electricity in it,
Ooh,
and so possibly.
that
And
scares me.
Jupiter
Go ahead.
is um, uh, in its exaltation, I believe, in Cancer. So Jupiter
Yeah.
here is stronger than that Saturn. So um, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Ooh, perfect.
Okay, so we have some angel wings, 2 points of Thales, a grand trine in water, and another trine. So go ahead, Sue, and start.
Yes, this is always the flowing energy, the connective energy. We look at what the action is. The first one that we saw it had all of these aspects, and now we've trying to isolate them to say, what are we looking at as the whole? Angel wings is an interesting denotation that I've just learned, when they have 2 points of Thales. And what is that? He was a great mathematician back in antiquity. And it's this energy point, one planet that sextile and with a trine to an opposition. Now, a mystic triangle automatically has that. And when here we don't have the mystic triangle, but we have 2 of them. And you can see it's with the red line of the opposition, which is a fascinating opposition in itself. I mean, what a PowerPoint this particular ingress of Uranus and Gemini is, because the points of themselves, as you might say, of the Thales points that are also in this sextile combination, happen to be with Saturn, if I'm reading this right, Saturn and Uranus and Neptune with Pluto. And for me, this is, and not just me, but this is spirituality. Vibrational astrology will say that when Saturn and Uranus are united, it is spiritual. It is finding the essence, the core essence that Saturn wants to find of anything. What's this? And that's why we call it the structure, the bones, the nitty gritty, without the fluff. What is really the bare essence of something that's core, with the spirit, with Neptune, that sees beyond into the mystical, not mystical, but the magical. What is extraordinary? And it could even be, for some people, a baseball game, or it could be a ballet dance. It could be whatever. But when you say that, what is extraordinary, far beyond, that gives the magic to life, the mystery of it, that gives that visionary quality to a person with the bare essence, it makes the spiritual. And with Pluto,
I
if we're
like
trying,
I like
go
that
ahead.
name, angel wings. I've never heard it, the 2 Thales points that when they're connected called that before. That's beautiful.
I think it was John Chenworth that said that.
Oh,
As you
okay.
know, yeah, that's a Northwest astrologer that we're from, and that's also with my kaleidoscope visions. Yeah. So go
Okay.
ahead. More thoughts about that.
Well, I'm ready to
Spoken.
go to the grand trine, but if you had another thought.
Well, I'm just looking at the conjunctions. It is interesting that Venus is so close to Uranus, within a couple of degrees. It's moving away, but still very, very close. And when we have such a power, and in many ways, Venus is the midpoint between Uranus and that opposition and the moon, which, of course, the moon is moving very fast. But still, we're looking at our values again with all of those very strong planets when you combine the 6 of them, just for that angel wings of interpretation, which is a constructive facet. So it won't be just one answer. You'll get a collection of how you're feeling from the past and sudden insights with all connected with a spiritual, a new dimension of evaluating our thoughts. So yes, our
And
values.
with that conjunction with Venus and Uranus, there could be a change, a sudden change to how we spend money, how we invest our money,
Oh.
our personal values on some level. So I like that you brought that up. So the grand trine in water is between the Sun, the North Node, and Juno. So that's a nice combination. So, Juno's about our commitments, our oaths, our partnerships, our marriages, and it is with the North Node. So, how are we going to move those forward? There could be recommitments, new commitments, and then the Sun's involved. So, I would say any intention, any energy that you put into your relationships will bring forth change in a positive way.
And very much core to yourself. When you get the sun and the moon together, that's primal. Most astrologies say that the midpoint between those two is very central to a person. And I know, again, in vibrational astrology, they say that when the sun and the moon are involved, which is how you see things, your whole as of now, in the past, the light that's coming in, which essentially is your emotional life, and in water, thank you, of emotions, and in Pisces going forward, which is the whole of the unconsciousness in a sense. Hopefully, again, we will be moving. If you hear a little business, there's a little ice happening in the background. Can you hear that, Liz?
Yes. And then
Okay.
the other aspect is Jupiter trine Vesta. And so expanding around our hearth and home, perhaps bringing up what we've repressed, maybe anything that's below the surface is coming to the surface. Do you want to add anything to that?
It's deep. Emotions everywhere. I think that one of the factors with the moon and any emotions is how close we're to it, and it really gets to our belief system. If we think we're being threatened, then, and the sun is in Cancer, and Jupiter will be in Cancer at this point, it really hits home. And therefore, we need that dichotomy or that other observation to be able to lift ourselves out a little bit, and perhaps to see how we're connected with the group. And I would say too that because Uranus is in Gemini, really form those connections that are close to you in your environment, whether it's with and that are near to you. And the environment, it could be, of course, on Zoom too, with neighbors such as you, Liz, but they will help strengthen and buoy and share through how to understand and interpret some of these, because it's very deep.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring up the Gemini part of your, Uranus being in Gemini. It's about siblings, and I named my show the Astrology Star Sisters. So we are like sisters in astrology.
Yes, I love
Chosen.
it.
And, there's going to be some new Astrology Star Sisters. So that's amazing. So, okay. So here you have the US chart with Uranus ingressing into Gemini on the outside. So go ahead.
It will affect, of course, as we've already recognized that this particular chart is for the United States, just to show the commonality that we have. Yet, in this case, this is in this biwheel, and maybe I can make it bigger. Good. Yes, it's bigger on my screen too. I don't know why I hadn't done that. The suns are nearly conjunct when Uranus ingresses, as Liz, you had mentioned, it's just 5 days after, or 3 days after the birthday. And also a Jupiter return, which I think is a fascinating combination. There's many charts for the United States, and the Sibley chart seems to be the common one that many of us use. The others have good validity, but looking at this one, it is a Sagittarius rising. And so Jupiter is very strong, both with its there in the 7th house, in the same sign as the sun, conjunct Venus, the two benefics, as we like to call them, although I tend to go away from that classification, but yet it is recognized. And so in itself, just those factors, this chart is strong. And how else it's looking at is the fact that those points of Thales that we were talking about are evident 2 times with the moon. The moon is also in Sagittarius. It's at 4 degrees in this particular sense, but it's not the moon. It's actually that those 2 points of spirituality that I brought that are conjunct with Neptune and Saturn that are transiting, that are the point of Thales, as I was saying, the power points, because they're sextile and trine. They're in a flow, they're in a communication, and it's in Aries. They want to initiate, and they have both just entered Aries, and they're moving much slower, of course, because they're longer cycles. So Uranus is the last of the outer planets. All of the outer planets by this time have moved into new signs, but they're in the party with it. They're saying, thank you very much. We're joining you, and we're being courageous, and we're going to help you figure out on new terms how you're going to find this new sense of value and harmonize.
And transiting Uranus is applying to a Uranus return for the United States. The United States just finished up its Chiron return. And then we have Mars in the natal Mars of the United States in a T-square with the nodes. So, lots of change and work to do to bring those changes about.
And that Mars is crucial because it rules Aries. And for many years now, Mars and Mercury, our personal planets, are going to be very, very, very important because they are the rulers. The outer signs have moved from what were rather more transpersonal signs to very personal signs, and the personal planets are the dictators, or not dictators, we don't want that word, are the guiding forces of those energies. And Mars gives us courage. It allows us to stand up and move forward and to become and to experience different meanings of what that means to become. It can be rapid with Gemini, of course, that in Mercury, that's asking us to look at this and look at that. But when Mars is looking at how we're going forward with that North Node in conjunction to the other energies, we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be quite a script, but it's encouraging. I think it's encouraging.
Okay, and then Uranus trines Saturn and Neptune, and this is August 11th of 2025 for Washington, D.C. And you can go ahead and talk about this because you added this in. So
I did, and thank you for bringing it up. But I think it's looking at the very first one, Uranus, which we're talking about with the ingress. It's trining the Saturn and Neptune, and it's exact, and that will be about a month later.
That's August. A sextile. Uranus is sextile to Saturn and Neptune.
Oh,
and it's trine to Mars and trine to Pluto. So it's a kite or a grand trine there. So, and the kite point and the tail is Mars. So Mars is kind of driving this kite. So that's really interesting. Pluto will be retrograde at this
I
time.
know what it is. Pardon me. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Yes.
So there's like they're communicating, and Saturn and Neptune will be retrograde. So it's really interesting. Mars is a personal planet with Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and we could consider Saturn an outer planet too. So these outer planets, navigating some change, but how are we going to work together?
Yes.
And this is an air trine. So I would say communication, negotiation, um, coming up with lots of ideas to work on.
Yes, it's going to be powerful.
And then this chart also has a mystical rectangle in it between Pluto is sextile to that Saturn and Neptune. Then it's trine to Mercury communication. Then it's sextile to Mars, and then trine back to Pluto. So kind of reiterating what I just said. So, putting in the effort and the hard work with the communication is a key point to move things forward and to assist with the change, because there's so many changes coming.
Well, it is. It is. It is. There's hope. I guess that's what it is. Really, I think back to our archetypal symbols that you were on, Liz, and you said to people, let the outcome be what it is. In other words, it isn't just stepping back and being the victim, but it is allowing the co-creation of source with us as we work the best we can under the circumstances that we have. But part of that is letting go of what the outcome will be in its exact form, such as this. Here I've had a great opportunity to discuss Uranus in Gemini, which I will later in the summer. And I was contemplating on giving a talk for UAC, but I haven't done that. But here I have an opportunity with you, and I'm very grateful for that. In other words, it's in some abstract form, what we want comes forth perhaps in a way that we personally couldn't see, but it answers the needs. There's many spiritual stories about that, how someone asked God, please come this and this, and maybe 4 people come to their tent. This is out in the desert, and they go, no, go away. And then God says to them, but I sent 4 people to you. So, it's like, and that's just one story analog. But here, it's very important that we allow life as much as we work at it, because everything in this is on many communications, many forces, many people in the cauldron.
And so many changes to come. And so it's like, if you don't like the first change, don't get too upset about it, because there's going to be a few more coming. So just take it stride.
Beautiful. Yes.
Okay. And then Uranus conjunct Saturn on June 28th, 2032. And I think we'll come back another time and talk about that, because we have a few years to work on that. But that's nice that you threw that in. And Saturn and Uranus are conjunct, and they both rule Uranus, but they're in Gemini, so that would be a Mercury ruled sign. Anything else you want to say about that?
It could be that all this 7 years is working towards this point, which is almost at the very end of its cycle. The cycle ends in 2033, I believe. And this is at 28 degrees, which is one of the most powerful degrees in the zodiac for many reasons, because it is like a culmination or near the anaretic, but it's at that decisive point. And here they're conjunct. You have Uranus, the 2 guiding rulers of Aquarius, and they're in Gemini, and Gemini and Aquarius. Aquarius is Uranus is a higher octave of Mercury. So there's all this really core part. And it's taken 7 years through goodness knows where we're at. And of course, there'll be different nodes but Pluto is still in Aquarius, and it'll be most interesting. It's going to be a time of a PowerPoint of action, and we shall see. But I think it's yep, that's all. You're right. We'll have to have more conversations.
So here you have the Gemini Uranus lunar node aspect. And I'm not sure what you wanted to talk about here, but go ahead.
Again, it's like, what is Uranus doing? Just to recognize that there will be these pivotal points. And the fact that I wondered in my query, when is it working with the nodes, which for evolutionary astrology is very important, but it's not that often, as it turns out. I thought it would be very frequent, but it isn't. They're going to happen twice with the mutable. It'll be in the next year of June 12th, 2026, which will be mutable. And then again, it won't be again with mutable because, of course, Gemini is a mutable sign. When it's in Sagittarius and Gemini, which will be much later, which will be, yeah. So those are points to recognize, because that will be at a decisive point of sudden changes going in those dynamics of what those archetypes are. More conversations of then there's a flowing aspect, and that will be with a trine with the lunar nodes, which is air and fire. It'll be in also in a few years, in September 30th.
Okay, we have a viewer that says, what do you think of the outcome of Uranus trine Pluto?
Oh boy, it synergizes the language, the mysticism, the AI, the bringing these terms when Pisces is our north node, of elevating the wholeness of the earth, of our whole world, of everything. It brings in, for me, very hopeful things, very idealistic things, to be truthful with it. And again, there'll be challenges. There'll be challenges that if we go too fast, too forward, which of course is going to be the changes going towards all this mentality of where is the physicality? Where is our heart? Where are we united with our oneness of feeling, which ultimately changes everything? It isn't our thought, it's how we feel about it. So it's very important that we stay connected to our heart of those values that are paramount. That's also with our history of who we are, with our moon. It's going to have its challenges. It could be very elitism, where yes, I have my group, but it's just me and 3 people, it's very tiny. The standards are just too ridiculous. So there's going to be distinct freedom breakings of that oath of some kind of elitism to be for the collective.
Thanks for that. And I would say that for some, it could be stepping into your power and moving forward, because maybe you've been in the background and it's time to step forward. And then another comment that we have.
And finding your community. It is a really distinctive time. That's the best part of it. I just didn't want to have too many roses, but yes, finding that community of your like-mindedness is actually scintillating, and you can find it in so many different dimensions. It's going to change what neighborhood is. Your neighborhood could be in some parts of Africa that you're on a Zoom with Central America.
And then the other comment is, it looks like maybe it's a good time to start a new writing project. And I would agree with that. How about you?
Absolutely.
Or a podcast or any kind of communication.
Yes, media of all terms. What we know now, that's absolutely right.
Okay, go ahead and speak to the Uranus, trine, Aquarius, and Pluto, which we kind of been speaking to that and answering questions about it. And
Yes, and isn't that very appropriate in a sense? The audience is picking up immediately, intuitively, where we're going. That is such a good recognition. Thank you. It does segue. It's a case in point of experiencing something, because, and 26 and 27, 28 are not that far away. That's what I appreciated, that with this trine, this flow of support, you could say, that we're wanting. And that's another thing with evolutionary astrology, not evolutionary, but vibrational, that you, in a trine, you want it to continue. You work, I muted myself. You work hard to continue it. And so therefore, in the next several years, we're going to be working with these mutable fire with the lunar nodes, for instance, as a shift in powerful ways, and distinctly different if you look at where the past is from discernment and our everyday life, which now we're really focused on, to looking at how we're manifesting and using. And it's going to be supportive, won't it? Looking at it from the best way, because if we figure out what's not working on our daily process, having to bring more meditation in, or maybe exercising more to keep our body, or whatever it is, or just organizing our day so our first hour works on this versus and resting in different hours, then we can manifest and do that creativity that Leo wants us to do.
And these dates are the exact dates when the aspects happen, this trine, but pretty much it's within orb 26, 27, and the beginning of 28. So even though it's not exact, pay attention.
But what's so fascinating with the last one is that the US has its Uranus return um, on May 9th.
Yes.
And that is in 2028.
Okay.
So, I, yep,
And then you have the chart
there it
here
is.
for that Uranus return, and that's good information because, yes, Uranus, and then Venus and Mars are conjunct, and Pluto transiting is conjunct the south node of the US, and the north node is conjunct the natal US Pluto. And then Juno is conjunct the north node of the natal US chart, and the south node is conjunct Mercury. So that's really interesting.
It is. It's really bringing heart and our actions together in a spontaneous, emphatic, brilliant, perhaps Uranian way, but it's the transformation is incredible. Looking at Pluto, that's what it connotes there. That and really is the core of what we have, what we think of with our traditions. You know, in at 27 degrees, that we'll be going towards, and then again, be with the North Node in that degree in Capricorn, and at the same time releasing what our South Node is by maybe being to elitism. Maybe we have become to elitism with that Aquarian South Node, and so therefore we're restructuring it through Saturn. Isn't that fascinating?
Yes. Well, I want to thank all of you that have joined us live, and all of you that will come back later. And welcome to 2025, the year of change.
Oh, Liz, it's been a delight. Thank you so very, very much.
Yes, thank you for joining me today. And Sue will be back on talking about the dwarf planets in the near future. And come back and enjoy more episodes of the Astrology Star Sisters. And Sue is the host of Talk Cosmos, and I'm part of the Archetypal Symbols team. And we will be talking about the Pisces new moon on February 27th at 1 p.m. And you can see that on my channel or Sue's channel. And here's Sue's little advertisement, and I'll let her tell you about it.
Yes, we are weekly. There's 6 different panels, and they rotate beautifully. We seem to augment each other, and I love having Liz on my new moon one, and we use many different factors. Many of you, I think, listen to it, but it does involve looking at the new moon from all its metaphysical attributes, whether that's Vedic chakra or whether it's mythology or numerology and Sabian symbols, to get to that astrological understanding, how you can reset your intentions. So I appreciate having this exchange with Liz. And it
Yes,
can
and
be
you can sign up for her newsletter or subscribe to her Talk Cosmos YouTube channel. And Sue and I both do consultations. I have a newsletter and a YouTube channel, and I appreciate you subscribing. And other episodes with Astrology Star Sisters are the dwarf planets, planet stationing, decans using astrology and tarot, fixed stars, Uranian astrology, and Chinese astrology. And we've been working on the 2025 astrological highlights, and I still have a few more episodes coming. And then a new one coming in a month or so is Astrological Magic with Robert Passetti. And then Justin and I do the monthly astrology forecast, the full moon forecast, and a Chiron asteroid series. And to get a hold of Sue, it's talkcosmos.com is her website, and my website is alightpath.com. And reach out or leave comments below, and we'll get back to you. Thanks again, Sue, for joining me today. I so appreciate it. And goodbye for now.
Yes, thank you.